With no point of reference, you spoke to the dark and fleshed out the wonder of a life. And as you speak, 100 billion galaxies are born. In the vapor of your breath, the planets form. The stars were made to worship so alive. I can see your heart in everything you made. Every burning star sing the fire of grace. Creation sings your praises so alive. God of your promise, you don't speak in vain, no syllable empty or void. For once you have spoken, all nature and science follow the sound of your voice. And as you speak, 100 billion creatures catch your breath, evolving in pursuit of what you said. If it all reveals your nature so alive, I can see your heart in everything you say. Every painted sky sing the fire of grace. Creation still obeys you so alive. So the stars were made to worship so alive. The mountains bow in reverence so alive. The oceans roar your greatness so alive. For if everything exists to lift you high, so alive. The rocks cry out in silence, so alive. The wind goes where you send it, so alive. The sum of all our praises still falls shy. We'll sing again 100 billion times. God of salvation, you chased down my heart through all of my failure and pride. On the hill you created, the light of the world, and lived in darkness to die. And as you speak, 100 billion failures disappear. Where you lost your life so I could find it here. If you left the grave behind you so alive, I can see your heart in everything you've done. Every part designed in a work of art, called love. the promise, your very body began to breathe. Out of the silence, the roaring lion declared the brave has no claim on me. Then came the morning that sealed the promise. Your very body began to breathe. Out of the silence, the roaring lion declared the grave has no
Let's pray. Dear Lord, let's take this message that Scott's about to tell us to heart, not just let it go in one ear, not the other, but really take it into next week. Let everyone know about Scott's message and the Lord's message tonight. That's all I got. Amen.
Give it up for the worship team and John once again. Well done. So before we start, I'm going to confess something to you. I did something stupid a little bit ago. Tony, how long have we been doing church streaming?
Since
June. Live. So for the first part of tonight, there was no audio going out to them, so I'm sorry for you guys. I apologize for that. But you all sounded pretty in here. I don't know, when did I figure out? Like halfway through the first song? I look down, like there's nothing going up and down. Like, where's the audio? And all of a sudden I get a text from Brian Flanagan. So thank you, Flanagans, for letting me know that there was no audio. Have you ever noticed there's one category in life that seems to always cause arguments? I am not talking about politics. I am not talking about religion. I am talking about superheroes. If I say DC or Marvel, and you all respond by what? Which one's best? Yell out.
Marvel.
I mean, see, like 85% of the room automatically just assumes that Marvel is best, but they're so uneducated. All because they've had such better movies, right? Let's be honest. In your lifetime, the movies have been a lot better. You go back, you go back to like Val Kilmer, you go back to those days of Batman, those are better, more tolerable than Ben Affleck. But we had Christian Bale, which was amazing, but DC's better. Just want to throw that out there. But also, you think about, we love superheroes, am I right? Like the number one show in the world right now is WandaVision, if you've watched it or not. Dave, did you ever catch back up? You stopped after the second episode, didn't you? Pick it back up, dude. My gosh. We're going to talk about some WandaVision. WandaVision. That's on Disney Plus. It just ended on Friday night. You can watch all night of it. You need to stream it all.
But do you have to know everything about it?
No.
Okay.
No.
I watched it.
Not really. It is fantastic. Marvel's.
Can you say that?
Wow. But we love superheroes, and David Bright is not my hero anymore. We are done. But think about it, not only is it the number one show in the world right now, like superhero movies are usually the most grossing movies of like Avengers Endgame is the highest grossing movie still today, right? Like today is insane how much money that movie brought in because we love superheroes. We love the idea of being rescued. We love the idea of people doing amazing and extraordinary things to save people. You know, good guys fighting bad guys, the weak being saved by the strong, all these brave and cool, crazy people doing all these extraordinary things. And maybe we love superheroes because we all love the idea of superheroes existing in our own world. Maybe we like the idea of a superhero coming out to our lives to help us out from time to time. Someone who could rescue us from our algebra class that we're constantly failing. That was my experience. Or maybe the idea of some of you guys who are older, you're like, I got to put all these college applications in on time. They have to have all these references. I don't know who to ask. You can ask me. You can ask Tony. I mean, we'll lie for some of you. Just kidding. You can like all these things you got to do to push in deadlines. Like someone come through and rescue me from. Or my parents' life, my single mom's life is so difficult. I would love for somebody to come in and make her life just a little easier. And there are times in life where we just wish somebody could do something to help us out. Someone to make everything better, make things change, to solve problems, to do something. And that's what we're going to be talking about for the next few weeks. Not talking about Superman, Wolverine, the idea of doing something. We just finished a series, for those of you who have not been here, or those of you who have, just need a recap. What was our last series called? It's personal. No, you can answer it. Just kidding. It's personal. The idea that Jesus knows you by name, He knows your backstory, He knows everything about you and still loves you no matter what. He sees your potential. Well, that's great. But now we have to follow that up. If we just ended where we ended last week, I would do such a disservice to you guys. Because now it's time for us to actually do something. We're going to talk about these big areas of life where we just wish somebody would do something. We wish somebody would do something. And we're going to talk about some things that just aren't quite right. The things that seem unfair, the stuff that we name as injustice. Now, when I say the word injustice, automatically, multiple categories pop into your head. A lot of different areas of life, of injustice, pop into your head. But let's go ahead and start off with a definition of what I mean by injustice. Justice simply means something is right, fair, or equal. That's what justice means. Can we put that up on the screen? Is it not coming up? It's all good. I made a mistake also. Before I continue, here's an injustice we're going to talk about. Everyone stand up, look back at the video booth, and give Lindsay Lizer a round of applause. Everyone say, thank you for the hot dogs.
Thank you for the hot dogs.
Now look at Joe
Thanks for nothing.
and say, shame on you. Okay, you can have a seat. Lindsay told me an amazing story. Joe he goes off to be a superhero to fight a fire, right? Brush fire. Lindsay was the superhero watching Paige and a nursing newborn and a girl that almost caught or did catch on fire, right? And then she said, did catch on fire? The girl caught on fire. When she said girl, I thought she said girl. I'm like, oh, is she okay?
My girl caught on fire?
Hey, you lost the ability to have any opinion, so. Just kidding. Did it pop up at all?
How ironic.
It's all good. Next one. There we go. I have a definition there. Let's go back to the definition of justice. Should be the next one. Okay, so justice, what do we say? Something right, something fair, something equal. Injustice, not right, unfair, unequal. Just the opposite of what justice is. And those are the things that we're talking about in our world, the things that are right, the things that are fair, the things that are equal, and on the opposite side of things that are not right, that are unfair and unequal. But most likely I did not need to define that for you. You know what injustice is. Now, most of us, something came up to our mind when I said that word. Something automatically popped into your head. Maybe it's something big and global like human trafficking. I'm wearing the End It Movement shirt. To recognize that there are 40 million people enslaved in the world today. When I got this t-shirt, I did the math earlier, it was 8 years ago. 9 years ago. Told you I did poorly in math earlier. 9 years ago I got this t-shirt. At that time, 27 million people enslaved in the world. So in just this 9-year period, two things have either happened. One, that many more people have been enslaved, or the amount of awareness that was raised for those 27 million opened up more eyes to see, no, it wasn't, that number was way too low. And actually it was upwards of 40 million, which is actually the highest it's ever been in human history. For maybe some of you, it's something like human trafficking, maybe it's global poverty, world hunger. The idea of a kid going home at night with nothing to eat just breaks your heart. Maybe it's something local that just seems unfair, like a local tragedy. It's just right around your corner, right there in your neighborhood. Maybe you experienced an injustice in your life, and this idea is just so painfully deep in your heart. Or maybe you've made it to that side of TikTok where all of a sudden, because you have that, and you went down the rabbit trail of TikTok, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I never knew that existed. I never knew something that awful existed. And it's helped you to see an injustice that you've never experienced. But what I'm getting at is something comes to your mind. Something comes to your mind for all of us when we think about this idea of injustice. In fact, it's the one thing, and parents, we're going to talk about this later, that I love about Generation Z. Now, I ragged on you guys a little bit last week just to have fun with you. Adults, there's this whole big thing now about Gen Z. Like they're laying off the boomers, they're going after millennials now. Like boomers went after millennials, Gen Z went after boomers, now Gen Z's going after millennials. It's like, okay, come on. Lay off the side parts, lay off the skinny jeans, like let us do our own thing, right? But one of the things that's cool about Generation Z because of the abilities that you have, because of the devices and the platforms that you have, you are more aware of injustices around the world than anybody else was at your age. When this movement started, the End It movement, I got an Instagram like a week later. It was still a new thing. And I've said, like, the idea of how much awareness has been raised since that movement started 9 years ago. And now you guys have the ability to know more about it, to see more. And sometimes that's not a pleasant thing to see, but sometimes you see things. You're more aware of things going on around the world. But the real question is, does injustice exist? Because if I say, does injustice exist, you're not going to say yes. But the real question we need to be asking is, why doesn't somebody do something? If injustice exists, which I do believe all of us would agree that they do, maybe we can debate about what those words or what kind of injustice, but the real question is, why doesn't somebody do something? And that's the question we're going to wrestle with over the next few weeks of this series. What does it look like, and whose job is it to do something about injustice? As we get started, I have to admit, a conversation like this can be very tricky. Because, as I said earlier, once I said the word injustice, you already thought about a certain characteristic, a certain area of injustice. You may even already be sitting here assuming where I'm going the next few minutes. You already might be defensive. You already might be excited about where we're going. But also, it's tricky for some of you. This feels so heavy because of the injustice that you've experienced in your own life. You've experienced injustice in your own life. You've been thinking about this for a long time because you've experienced it. You've seen how it's affected your family, how it's affected your friends, how it's affected you. This topic is not a pleasant one for you to hear. If that is you, what does the sign say when you walk up the stairs? You belong here. This room, this place, this church is a safe place for everybody, no matter what they come from, no matter what they've been into, no matter what's been done to them. This is a safe place. And hopefully you feel that you are loved, that you are valued, and you are a child of God, and there's nothing that's going to take that away from you. We don't ignore things here. There may be some things that we don't always see, but we're trying to be humble enough to recognize them and ask questions. We want this to be a safe place where you can talk to people. You can talk about your real life experience, where you can share with your friends who are going to love you and support you. But on the flip side, some of you have never experienced any kind of injustice. You've never experienced it. Some of you are like, I don't even know what this means. Maybe you feel surprised by this conversation. Maybe you feel surprised by the idea of it. Maybe when you were younger, you thought about things like access to education or racism or food or insecurity. Or maybe, as you've gotten older, you started to see some of the things around you. Maybe you started seeing some of these things on social media, like, okay, I see that, I don't really understand it. It's not my experience, I don't really know how to go along with this. You've asked the question, why doesn't somebody do something about this? Why doesn't somebody stop this? So you've asked questions like this. Why are there some students that never get in trouble when you should, or when they should, while others always get in trouble, even if they're not doing anything wrong? Okay? That is an injustice, maybe not the injustice you were thinking about automatically. What about this one, the next one? Why do people still act like it's okay to make jokes that are racist, sexist, and ableist, which means making jokes about those who are disabled? Why are there people who still feel like it's okay to text somebody a joke, to send them a DM on Instagram, an appropriate joke? Why is that okay today? Or maybe the third one, why does that guy continue to be bullied, but no one seems to care enough to do anything about it? Maybe you are that person who's being constantly bullied. Maybe you are the person who's constantly bullying somebody else. Or the next one, why does one person in our friend group go home to a house that feels unsafe while others don't have to worry about it? Why is it that when they go home, I am scared for their life when I go home and am safe and sound in my own bed? Or maybe the last one. Why are there kids, so many little kids in our community, who don't get to eat if school is closed? Why is it not normal for everyone to have access to 3 meals a day? And some of that became real for us in the last year. As schools were shut down, people were scrambling, people were donating to make sure that there were kids who had meals on weekends and meals during the day. My point is, when we see injustice, whether it's our experience or somebody else's experience, it makes us ask some hard questions. It makes us wonder how others don't see this and how we never saw it before. It's not that we don't care about injustice. I think sometimes we don't do anything about injustice because we just don't get close enough to see it, to see what's really happening, to ask hard questions. Now, this idea is nothing new. We aren't the first people. You aren't the first generation. You might be more aware on some levels, but you are not the first generation to ask these hard questions. In fact, Jesus made a habit of pointing out a lot of things that people had never seen before. One of the questions people asked Jesus was simply this: who is cool with you? Who is not? That was a common question that people asked him, basically saying, who is right? Who is wrong? Who's the good guy? Who's the bad guy? Who's the Batman? Who's the Joker? Right? That's a different translation, but basically the message is the same. Who is good with you? Who's in good standing with you? And in response, Jesus often used stories with real-life examples to reveal a bigger truth. In this case, the story we're going to look at, he used the story of sheep and goats to explain the difference between the righteous and the unrighteous. The righteous and the unrighteous. Think back. The good guys, bad guys. Jesus was simply trying to make it clear that there were two categories here. And since flocks and shepherds were part of life, he's speaking right into their culture, everyone would have been familiar with this example that he's sharing with them. So again, the question was presented: who is cool with you? Who's in good standing? Who's on the right side? Who's on the wrong side? In this story, the sheep are on the right. The sheep are considered righteous. The goats are considered unrighteous. Listen to what he says to these goats. Scripture should be next. There we go. Then he will say to those on his left, depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. Keep going. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me. They will answer, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or needing clothes or sick or in prison and did not help you? He will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me. Then they will go away to eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life. In this story, Jesus distinguishes between the righteous and the unrighteous, the good guys and the bad guys, but how they responded to the needs of the least of these. So this is how you guys have responded to these people. To the needs of those around him who Jesus defined as the prisoners, the hungry, the sick, the strangers. In other words, people who needed the most help. Who felt the most pain. Who constantly was getting the worst treatment by society. Now, it may seem a bit extreme. You might ask, is Jesus really this mad because they didn't give somebody water? Listen to the level of shock, though, that the goats expressed in response to what Jesus said. When did we not see you? When did we not see you? When did we not clothe you or feed you or give you water? It's as if they are saying, not me, I have never done that. He hasn't physically been hungry. He hasn't physically been thirsty or in prison, but he wanted to make a point. Not only did you not do something about injustice, but you did not even see it. He's like, not only did you not do something about it, you didn't even see it. He says, you're missing the point. You're missing the point of injustice when we don't see it. When you don't see those who need your help, you're blind to this. You're missing out on part of what it means to follow Jesus himself. Remember, this is a story about who is good with Jesus and who is not. And it is very clear about the answer. His people are people who see and act when it comes to injustice. I'll say that again, because that was awesome. His people are people who see and act when it comes to injustice. I'm not saying that that is what it takes to start a relationship with Jesus, but I am saying that as you get to know him, as you get to know who he is, as you get to know about what he cares about, your heart begins to be transformed to be more and more like his and less like yours. And your heart begins to break for the very things that breaks his heart. That your eyes begin to shut down on your own needs and your eyes begin to open up on the needs of others. This is why we sang the song, and I didn't even think about it whenever Audrey suggested it, Let There Be Light earlier. Open the eyes of the blind. Open the eyes of the blind for those who have not seen Jesus, but also sometimes we need to open the blinds of the ones who claim to follow him. And if you follow him, you become more like him in that way, because you begin to see injustice differently than you ever did before. So we talked about the last 5 weeks. It's personal. Yes, it's great, but now it's time to open up your eyes, let your heart be transformed, to start doing something like he would do. But listen, here's what I want you to take away tonight. Before you do something about injustice, you have to see it. Before you do something about injustice, you have to see it. And that's where we need to start. We need to be able to look around and see what is happening. What's happening? We need to be able to notice the injustices in our daily and ordinary world. Not just the things that are over there, the things that are around here, but also the things that are right in here. We all have room to grow in this. Nowhere am I standing up here saying, I have figured it out. I'll share in a minute how there's been times where I've not figured it out. But in order to do something about injustice, you have to see it. I'm going to give you 3 ways that we can start growing in this. The first thing, we have to get close enough to see it. We have to get close enough to see it. How do we do this? Well, there are a few things we can do. For starters, we can pray that our eyes will be open. I remember in college, my roommate and I would pray daily for our eyes to be open, to see things of him, to see his glory, but also to see where we were supposed to go. And I was literally shocked on a daily basis the things that I would see that I normally would not. So we start off with prayer. Then we need to start spending time with people who are different than us. And this is not easy. Let's go back one. It's not easy. Because naturally, who do we hang out with? People who are what? Similar. We hang out with people who are similar. And think about this world. This world is a world of diversity. People are not always just like us, whether it's in appearance, whether it's in occupation, whether it's in anything. But we naturally gravitate to people who are just like us. But it's time for us to step out and do that. Now listen, I know this sounds terrifying because most of us, for being honest, we always would rather text somebody than call somebody. Why? What? It's easier. It's also what? More comfortable. The idea of talking to somebody already on the phone is uncomfortable. I shared with you how, for whatever reason, I freak out in the drive-thru of J.R. Zona Castle. It's because of Katie's told me for years I was rude to the lady at J.R. Zona Castle. So I'm just so convinced I'm going to be the most polite person in the world, and I start stuttering like no other. I'm like, maple donut. Please, thank you. Love you. No, why did I say love you? Like, I've come close, I'll be honest. It's been close. I have deep feelings for JRs, I guess. But sitting next to somebody who's different than who we normally sit with in the cafeteria. Stepping out of our comfort zone, stepping out of our mid-high valley bubble, and talking to somebody who lives somewhere else. When I say I was going to share a story, I've shared this before, I think. I did not know the level of racism in our world until I got out of the Ohio Valley. Specifically when I traveled to South Africa. If you know anything about South Africa, it wasn't until the mid-90s that this thing called the apartheid ended. And the apartheid was something that wreaked havoc on a continent. The Zulu people against the whites. And constantly, the Zulu people, the locals, were getting pushed around, placed in the government housing. When the World Cup came, it was an awesome, big ordeal. Those stadiums were built on Zulu lands, and they were forced out of their homes that they've been living in for hundreds of thousands of years and placed into a brick building made by the government. Not only that, then they have the largest population of Indians outside of India. And India comes from a caste system. Where levels of, they look down upon a woman in our group because she worked retail. They thought the world of my mom, who was a pastor's wife. They would rarely talk to her, but they almost worshipped my mother. So you get this country which has 16 national languages in one country. We got English, Appalachian, right? That's it. No, I'm talking about 16 national languages. A melting pot of people and all this diversity. And I remember going to this church, a Baptist church. And this church was an Indian Baptist church in the middle of a Zulu village. All these government houses around this church. And you pull into the church, I'm not even kidding. Imagine pulling into FECW tonight and seeing barbed wire, razor wire, brick walls all the way around our church. And like people with guns on their hips, letting you in and out. You walk into the room, you sit down, and quickly you realize, where are the women? It's all men, probably 75 of them, and then all kids. There was no women around, no mothers around. The weird thing though is all these kids were all from the Zulu village. So you have Indians and the Zulus. And now, like we joked before, I think, about growing up in church, you get the people who when you're being disruptive in church, you get the person who comes behind and flicks you on the ear, that I'm talking about. Or when Joe Liza's on his phone, I'm up in the video booth, and I hey, get off your phone. Text him because I'm just watching it. I'll watch all y'all. Just kidding. I see which one of y'all are on TikTok during church. But imagine that, but amplify it to getting smacked in the back of the head, getting screamed at, getting ridiculed. And then the lesson goes on. Like a Sunday school lesson about Adam and Eve. I'm like, this will be fun. And I'm sitting there with all the kids, and I have never heard it more adamant about who it was that is the main contributor to all sin in the world. It wasn't Adam. Who was it? Eve. And then the people that we were staying with had a Zulu girl who worked for them. And they treated her like utter garbage. I remember thinking to myself, I need to do something. I need to say something. I'm ready to fight Pastor Daniel. You're a man of God, but I can take you, right? And I struggle with this. I was like, how in the world can you justify these things? How can you rationalize that your treatment of this person is in line with what you read about in Scripture, what you preach about on Sunday? That person is made in the image of God. That woman is made in the image of God. That child is made in the image of God. And what are you? And I came home thinking that was just something I saw over there. And then all of a sudden it became completely real here. And I started to see the Mid-Ohio Valley differently. I started seeing my own heart differently. I started seeing all kinds of things different because we have to get close enough to even see it. To see someone whose experience is not like our own. To learn about their experience. To watch a movie about injustice. If you want to read books about injustice, whatever topics, I'm sure Tony and I would love to share some with you. That's the first thing. Get close enough to see it. The second thing, be curious enough to listen. Be curious enough to listen. The quickest way to see injustice is to listen to the people who are experiencing it. Side note. If anything, 2020 showed us in our world is that people do not listen. Because if your first response to someone sharing their story or sharing their experience with you, your first response is, yeah, but, ... If your first response is a quick rebuttal, you are not listening. I told Caden when he walked through the door earlier, he's wearing our Winter Retreat shirt. That was a year ago. It's the last event that we actually had outside of this room was a year ago. The week before that, we were doing the series, James, be slow to speak, quick to listen, slow to become angry. And I had no idea that a couple months later that would come back. We talked about these different ideas of injustices that we saw throughout 2020. It's a simple fact that we don't listen anymore. But think about what they are saying. But listen. A lot of times what they say may make you uncomfortable. It may make you uncomfortable, especially if it's a kind of injustice that you have never experienced, or worse, that you have participated in. And we're like, I would rather be comfortable, I'd rather not think about it. But listen, sometimes getting uncomfortable is the best thing for us. It's not necessarily bad, it's actually a good sign. When bad things make us uncomfortable, it means you're beginning to see, it means you're beginning to hear, not only the way people are experiencing, but you're also getting to begin to see and hear how God is moving. Be curious about their experience. And maybe you'll notice that you've maybe experienced some form of injustice, whatever it may be. And maybe in your own life, you just kind of brushed it off because the person actually said, it's not that big of a deal. Be curious about it. Be open to what God is doing in you. The third thing, be courageous enough to name it. Be courageous enough to that means if it is wrong, we have the courage to say, that is wrong. If we see anybody in this world, no matter what kind or what level of injustice, ever being stripped of their dignity, that they are a child of God, made in His image, and we feel like we have the audacity to say, you are not made in the image of God, shame on us. But we have the courage to say, that is not right. Identifying injustice takes away some of its power. It begins to start to bring change, the change that we want to see, the things that we want to acknowledge. And that may be the hardest part for some of us. It's risky. Another thing that 2020 showed us, and again, I say this in all humility, this is not a arrogant bashing anybody. In 2020, another thing we saw was when people would begin to step out and start to name injustices, some circles began to break. Some friendship circles began to break. I don't quite agree. I don't agree with that, so I don't know if I should be spending time with you. Or I think completely opposite direction. I think that's just a skewed idea, a skewed perspective, so I'm not going to be in fellowship with you anymore. That's risky. To name injustice. It's risky to name sin. It's risky to name something that makes us uncomfortable, makes other people uncomfortable. But it's important because once we name injustice, we also feel ownership and the responsibility no longer to wish somebody else would do something, but now we can say, I'm going to do something now. I'm going to do something now. So much of following Jesus is learning to see, learning to think, and learning to live in a way that's not natural to us. We follow a Savior who came and lived a life that's countercultural, a life that's not natural for any of us. And one of the things that I love about you guys is that many of you actually, I said about my, I was told 9 years ago when the Indie movement started, what I'm saying to you. It's your generation. It's the most aware. And I'm like, it's 10 years later, I'd say that is false. Not that I'm criticizing millennials, Gen X, boomers, anybody. You guys just have a special ability to see things because of what's been provided to you. But you can be the generation to do something. You can be the generation to end human trafficking. You can be the generation to say no to racism. You can be the generation who says no to child hunger, to child poverty, to poverty. There's been times where things seemed impossible. When someone said, I'm going to do something, the impossible became possible. And then all of a sudden other people started to see it and join in their efforts. And one of the reasons why we have small groups here, why we break out into discussion times, is to allow one another to encourage one another, to share, hey, this has been my experience of what I've seen. Oh, I've never seen that before. Tell me about that. Or this has been my experience of what I have felt, what I've been called. I've never heard that, but I have said those words before. And we share in this time together. And in a moment, we're going to close with one more song, and then we'll go into those groups. But coming off of It's Personal, that series into now, you know what the number one injustice in the world is? The number one. It's not human trafficking. It's not racism. The biggest injustice in the world is that there are, quote unquote, 1 billion Christians who claim to love Jesus, who claim to follow Jesus, but don't give a crap about the other 5 billion people going to hell. Oh, it makes me uncomfortable to talk to somebody about their faith. I don't really care about their eternity because I'm uncomfortable. I don't really want to talk about sin, even though I think that sin may be causing a big problem in their life. How much do we as Christians have to hate people to send somebody to hell? That is the number one injustice in this world. And I want to think about that the next few weeks as we wrestle with all these injustices, as we talk about what do we do, how do we think, how do we live. And I'm not going to be up here and say, this is how you're supposed to think. This is how you're supposed to see things. I'm not talking about all the different cultural things. I'm talking about just simply what do we do as believers? How do we align our hearts with God, whose heart breaks when people are broken, and have a world who does not know Him? Before you do something about injustice, you have to see it. I'm going to close this out in prayer, and we're going to spend time worshiping together. Father God, I thank you so much for this evening. I thank you for the opportunity we've been able to have to spend time together. And while I know these ideas and these thoughts can be uncomfortable for some, uncomfortable for myself too, because none of us have ever made it. We are not where we need to be. We are not who we should be. But God, I do pray in this moment that you begin to open up our eyes a little more. Give us a little more clarity. Give us a little more vision of where we are responsible for injustices and where others are responsible for injustices. Not so we can point our fingers, not so we can condemn, not so we can judge, but simply so we can act. God, you have placed your Spirit in every Christian here in order that they would be a blessing. God, shame on us if we take all the blessings that we have and never extend it to anybody. It's one thing to come together and extend blessings to one another as believers. But God, you are calling us to be your church. You're calling us to be your people who extend blessings to the very ends of the earth. You promised that way back in the very beginning of your book. That through one man, this entire world will be blessed. And we are part of that blessing. So God, I pray you stir within our hearts. You open up our minds. You stir our affections to love you more, but also to love more people. To strip away the hate, to strip away the thoughts that are against you, to give us only peace, love, and mercy, to extend to one another. God, if there's someone in this room who has never experienced you tonight, I pray that tonight is that night. If they want to place their faith in you for the first time and say, hey, I've experienced injustice, I don't want anything else, I want you. I pray that tonight is that night that they do that, they do so with a full heart, ready to grow in you, ready to become more and more like you. God, as we sing songs to you, I pray that all these words that we offer up to you are pleasing and honoring to you. Your son's name we pray. Amen.
Y'all can stand. Gotta give you what I can today. These scattered ashes that I hid away, I laid all at your feet. From the corners of my deepest shame, the empty places where I bore your name, show me love. I say I
guys go off to your small groups, we're going to break out here in a second. There's a lot of people in here that you may not know. So here's what I want you to do real quick. Everybody take a deep breath. Hold it. Put your mask down for a second. Don't breathe. And just kind of look around the room. Find somebody you don't know. See them? Okay, on your way out, what I want you to do, you can put your mask back up and breathe, sorry. I mean, come on, that wasn't that bad. I want you, as you guys break into your small groups or after small groups, what I want you to do is spend time talking to that person and get to know them. Invite them back next week. Those of you guys who are new, if I didn't get to meet you yet, I'm Scott. I probably should have said that earlier. I love you guys already. Bring back more people next week. We're going to continue to get back together, continue to move forward to normal as we can, and let's have a great time in small groups tonight. I love you guys. Mom, Dad, you guys can hang out here for a little while. Love to spend some time chatting with you guys.
Gentlemen,
Preferably out of this room for small groups.
Pelican